Hi everybody, and welcome to my next edition of Personal Brand Mechanics Interview. My name is Peter Sterlacci. I'm the founder of Believe, Become, Be Your Brand, where I work with on-the-move careers to help them to shift gears, get out of the saddle, and sprint to career success. So many of you who do know me and follow me, you know that I'm a crazy cyclist, and so that was really the motivation for putting together this interview series. I've learned a lot from actual bicycle mechanics about how to repair my bicycles. But since I got into the field of personal branding, I've also met some pretty amazing people who I feel are mechanics of personal branding. In other words, they have tools and techniques that I feel are really, really good for helping us to build, maintain, and even repair our personal brands. So today I'm happy to welcome my mechanic for today, which is Lida. Lida, I'm sorry, your last name is pronounced Citroen or?
Citroen.
Citroen. Okay,
yeah.
like the car. Okay, see, I should have known that. Well, I'm really happy to have Lida on the show today. You know, actually, I met Lida first. Whether she probably doesn't know this, but when you wrote your book, Reputation 360, last year, I remember getting the book and reading through it literally in a day, because it just was such an amazing, I think, summary of so many important things in the field of personal branding. And so I've recommended it to many people who ask me, you know, what are some books that they could use to really get into personal branding, and so that's how I really got first introduced to you. And so now fast forward some time later, and we've connected in various sources, so I'm really happy to have you on the call today, so welcome.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's great to be here.
So let's just jump right into the questions I have for you. You know, your company name is Lida360, and you know, the Lida part obviously is certainly very clear to me, but why 360? I mean, what is the meaning behind using 360 in your name?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, the Lida part took a lot more thought than the 360. I couldn't use my last name because it is a well-known car, and people would look for auto parts. But it was really important to me to put my first name in the company name because to me it represented putting a full equity, full reputation, my integrity into the business that I was building.
Sure.
The 360 really has to do with my belief that brand is the foundation, whether it's company brand or personal brand. Brand is the foundation, and when marketing and communications is integrated and full circle through the brand,
Right.
then results become much more effective and measurable and tangible and all those juicy things that we love to talk about. So it really
Sure.
represented a full circle approach.
Oh, that's really cool. So it's kind of like involving, you know, would you say it's more of a real holistic approach in terms of what you're looking at when you're involving yourself with working with people in their branding process?
Absolutely, absolutely, because it's all about integration, as you know.
Sure.
Consistency, integration. It's too easy to be fake.
Right.
So brands are authentic and they're integrated. They have a much higher success rate.
Oh, cool, cool, very cool. Well, I already mentioned, you know, your book, and you published that book. I guess it's been about
A year ago,
right?
Yeah.
And you know, you were already running, you know, a successful branding business for yourself before the book. So I was wondering how is being now a published author helping you? I mean, a lot of people talk about, well, that's one of the things we need to do. It's one of the ways to build your credibility. So how has it helped you so far?
Well, it's interesting. I won't say that I didn't think about the marketing aspects of the book when I started it, but really writing the book came out of necessity. I do a lot of public speaking, as you do, and I go to large events and speak in front of hundreds of people. And what I was finding is after I would talk about the importance of personal branding and what authentic personal branding really is, people would line up and want to hire me individually. And fortunately or unfortunately, they weren't my target audience. My target audience for one-on-one consulting and reputation management tends to be more of a C-level executive.
Got it.
The people that were coming up to me might have been realtors or interior designers or even doctors and lawyers who weren't at a partner level. And I had nothing for them. So I could tell them about my blog, I could tell them about, you know, articles that I've written, but they needed something more, but they didn't fully need me one-on-one. So I really wrote the book so that I would have something to turn around and offer them.
Oh, cool.
That at a much more, you know, digestible price point, and like you said, was something they could understand, get their head around, and it wasn't overly academic.
Right.
I used a lot of my clients' experience, so I have over 15 case studies in the book, and what it has turned into is this tool that's allowed me to connect with people like yourself,
Right.
And really broaden the discussion about personal branding.
Yeah, sure. So has it become like Has it become a calling card for you, would you say?
You know, that's interesting. And I've had people ask me that question, you know, do I hand it out like a business card? No.
No.
Because you know, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of investment. It was a lot of myself. And
Right.
if somebody asks for it, 9 out of 10 times, you know, I'll make it available to them.
Sure.
But in a lot of ways, it has introduced me to people.
Sure.
So because I write very authentically and I share my own experiences, and maybe not as far as I could have gone. It was a first book. But I share a lot in the book. And so you start learning my personal brand has a lot to do with generosity.
Right, right.
So in that sense, yeah.
So, you know, it's a lot of people say, you know, when you get into writing a book, often it's not necessarily the fact that you're selling the book, but it's the connections that you make that come out of the book. You know, the people that you meet, as you said, you have something now that you can give to the folks who are not necessarily part of your target audience. But as I said before, I mean, I find it to be, it's just a great book to sit down and just easily digest and find really great information, or even just, it's easy to pick up and look at and say, well, today I just want to read this piece about,
Right.
using social media or what have you, or the elevator pitch, which is a great part of the book that I really like as well. Well, you know, go ahead.
And I get those messages from people. I got an email the other day from actually a retired veteran from the military who said, Chapter 8 rocked my world. He said, I can't even believe I had no idea who my target audience was. So, you know, I had somebody email me and say, can I get a 2-for-1 because I wrote so much in the first copy? Can I get a second copy for free?
Right.
So however people are using it, I looked at a lot of other books, wanted to make sure mine wasn't overly academic or trying to set people up to become a celebrity or something that they might not want to be.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you mentioned already, you know, part of your target audience. I mean, you serve an interesting group of folks and the military community, actually. And if you go to Lida's site, you'll actually see some of that. And so I guess you're helping veterans to become more marketable in their transition from military life to civilian, right? Civilian life, correct? So
Yes.
What is your motivation behind serving this audience?
Well, you know, in all these questions, I'm going to sound really random. I was sitting at a Denver Broncos football game in 2008 or 2009, and it was Veterans Day. The team did a tribute to veterans and returning veterans, and I listened to this one, I think it was Air Force veteran talk about how difficult the transition had been and what it took to go from having a career in combat to having a career in the civilian sector. For some reason, I looked at my husband and I said, I think I have something that would help. Of course, he looked at me and said, because you have free time? I mean, what are you talking about? And it was a long journey to find a group that would allow me to offer those services. And today what I do is I work with typically service-disabled veterans, but really any veteran who is transitioning and trying to take a resume that talks about, you know, combat situations and make it relevant to a hiring manager in a corporate environment.
Interesting. And so, you know, it's like working with the military, which is very much a, you know, everyone's kind of, for lack of a better word, cookie cutter.
Yeah.
You know, and then trying to get, you know, them to break out of that mentality, I think is very interesting. So what have been a couple of your challenges working with this audience?
Well, I think something that you probably experience in the culture that you work in, the military has a strong culture, and that culture, as you intimated, does not support a lot of independent thinking. You don't want troops coming out of the box with ideas and protocol. So it is very organized. It is very structured. And when I work with veterans, oftentimes the hardest part for us to overcome is understanding that a corporate structure requires more independent thinking, requires self-promotion. That's not something that a military culture necessarily supports. And I think another big challenge has been trust, especially because I represent the civilian side. And the first thing I tell the groups that I work with is I have no connection to the military. I don't have a family member that has served. I don't know anyone close to me. That's not what's driving me. And I make it completely open for them. They can ask me any question, and we have talked about everything.
Interesting.
Because they have real questions about what is it like to work in a company versus to work out in, the desert of Iraq. So getting that trust was a big hurdle. They kept wanting to know what was in it for me.
Interesting.
And that
Yeah.
was tough.
Yeah. That whole with them thing, right? What's in it for me?
Well, exactly.
It's interesting because, you know, it's the same in a way for me in Japan and the culture that I work in. You know, I guess the credibility that I bring to the table is the fact that I've lived there for over 11 years and I'm very intimately familiar with the culture. My wife is Japanese, so, but I could see where, you know, building that trust is so critical. It really is, because you're going into a culture that is not necessarily your culture.
Right.
And you know, how do you break through that and establish that trust? It's really interesting. So, but as you said, that's not, I mean, the military is not necessarily your major niche. You know, I mean, really, you're looking at the C-level executives, correct?
Right. But most of what personal branding is reputation management.
Right.
And I find it more complex and more interesting to work with very high-level executives,
Sure.
senior vice president and above. And I do work with a lot of CEOs of companies and well-known figures that we both know and love. Helping them manage, and it's not just damage control, it's not crisis communication. A lot of the work that I get involved with is people who are, you know, at a very successful point of their career saying, I want it to mean something.
Sure.
How do I take all of this work and all of this equity that I've built in my reputation and do something good with it? Which was an interesting twist. I never thought that's where this career was going to lead me.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely has led you to be very active in the media, you know, between your TV appearances, radio, print, etc. As you mentioned before, you're actively out there speaking. So my question now is, like, what are your top 3 tips to build one's visibility and credibility across media channels? Because you're out there across channels, and so I'm just curious, what tips would you offer others?
Well, I think the first one is to be knowledgeable on your subject. You know, the whole world of social media gives us this beautiful platform to promote ourselves, but it also requires a lot of transparency and credibility. The last place you want to be outed as an imposter is online, because it's a very public forum. So really, to know your craft, to be knowledgeable on your topic would be my first recommendation. And that means being really specific about what it is you want to speak on. The second is to be authentic. I think audiences everywhere, whether it's in TV or in print or in social media, want to get to know real people. Sure. So if you're a happy person, smile. If you're not a happy person, you might want to stick with print, because that comes across. But to really be authentic and bring that genuineness, because the people on the other end, whether they're bankers or lawyers or people struggling to find a job or whoever they are, they're real people too. Sure. So they want to connect with a real person. And I think the third thing that has worked for me is generosity. I offer a lot. I offer tips. I offer suggestions. I make myself available and very generous spirit. And I've looked at leaders that I've worked with who have become visible, who've become very successful. And I think I wrote a blog about this a while back, that generosity seems to be a common thread. Yeah. Not holding back, not upselling, not always looking for what's in it for me. Right. I really believe that, you know, if you give it away, you can always make more. And I was actually, you know, Peter, challenged when I wrote my book by some people who do personal branding. Gave too much of it away.
I see. Interesting.
You know, it's kind of the start to finish. How do you do this, and how do you go out and market yourself with social and body language? Yeah. I can always make more.
Well, I mean, you make a really good point, and the whole idea of giving away is so critical. I think, you know, I think about, you know, growing up and being told, you know, look out for #1, and, you know, and all of that, and yet here we are. I think, as you mentioned, you know, with the social media and being able to really get your brand out there, but to use it in such a way where you are giving that away. I mean, I did an interview like a month or so ago with Gar Reynolds. Presentation Zen fame, and that's exactly what he said. You know, it's just like, you've got to give this stuff away, and then you find that by giving it away, it's amazing how it opens up so many doors and opportunities that you would have never ever thought. So, but it's, you know, I think that's a great tip. I love the generosity one for sure. I mean, all 3 are great tips, but the generosity is definitely a very good one. Yeah.
Well, and there's a fine line too, because I think you need to be generous, as I said, but there's a fine line about giving too much of it away.
Sure.
I actually started a conversation a couple of years ago on Forbes online, and it turned into an article by Forbes.com about that fine line between being generous and wanting to help people and show your wares, if you will,
Sure.
and getting taken advantage of.
Right, right.
So as consultants, that's a fine line we always have to walk, and you know, you can give enough away, but not give it all away.
Right, exactly. Hey, we still have to live and pay the bills too, you know, right?
There's that, yeah.
Exactly. So as you know, as I mentioned before, you know, I consider you to be, you know, a personal brand mechanic. You know, somebody who's got tools and techniques to really help us to prepare and build and maintain our personal brand. So, to give you a cycling image, I want you to imagine that someone's personal brand has a flat tire.
Yep.
And so what advice or tip or technique would you have so that they can pump up that tire and their brand is ready to ride again?
I love it. My husband is an avid cyclist, so
Great.
when I get that question, that's just hysterical. Well, my first question would be, are you sure you want to be the tire? You might want to be the road.
Yes.
You know, I don't call my program a leadership program because not everybody wants to be a leader.
Right.
Not everybody wants to be that engine. And personal branding is really about being the best you that you can be. But let's assume somebody does want to be the tire, and all of a sudden they've hit a flat. Don't blame the nail.
Yes.
Look at the situation. You know, it's always important to learn what got us into a situation and to be able to reflect back and see if there were opportunities that we missed that perhaps we could take advantage of. But it really is about looking forward. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, our life is about creating meaning. And whether that meaning is to be more profitable, whether that meaning is to be more charitable, or just be more significant in your small circle of friends, oftentimes we don't have a focus on what we want our brand to be. What is that desired reputation? I spend a lot of time talking about that in the book.
Yeah.
What is your vision for, you know, at the end of the day, how you want to be remembered?
Right.
And creating that legacy. And sometimes maybe the reason that we keep becoming a flat tire is because we keep trying to be something that we really aren't destined to be.
It's true.
So I'd say, you know, reflect back on what got you in the situation and then take control on what you can do going forward to make things better, because we only get one shot at this life.
Exactly, exactly. Oh, the nice thing is if you do have a flat tire, as long as you have enough tubes in your backpack, you can just keep repairing it, right? Yeah.
Well, see, I would be the one that flagged somebody down to know what that tube thing is supposed to do.
Exactly.
My husband carries all that. I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, well, I often tell people, and you know, in using the cycling analogies and the imagery when I do my personal branding work, you know, people who are not even cyclists, I mean, they get it. I mean, they get this sense of, you know, how can I repair something if it does break down, and I think that's one of the great things about personal branding. When you know, develop kind of the knowledge of what your brand is and the tools to how to communicate it, as well as the tools for how do you deal with it when you do go off brand. I mean, because that's going to happen. You know, getting the flat tire or whatever it is, I mean, that's you going off brand or something. And I think as long as you have the ability, you know, to, as you said, reflect and look back and how did you get there, and now what can you do differently next time, I think is very important.
Well, in breaking it down, you know, you are a cyclist, I'm not, but I do go out and I ride around, and when you get to that big hill, you know, that looks daunting, and my first inclination is, okay, let's get off and walk. I don't care how many people laugh. But what I've learned to do is just sort of say, okay, I can get to that post, and then I can get to that tree.
Exactly.
And you focus on things that are more manageable, because creating a legacy, especially when I talk at the university level, they're not thinking about legacy. They're thinking about getting a job or trying to advance in their career. So it really is about, you know, finding that point that you're trying to get to, and then break it down into manageable steps.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the post.
I love that. I'm going to have to use that. I'll credit you to it. But that's
the part about that I would get off the bike.
Though. Okay, but that's perfect, because that's exactly, I mean, as a cyclist, I mean, that's exactly what we do as a cyclist. And you know you have that mountain that you're climbing, but you're focusing on a certain point. You get to that point, etc. And yeah, it's totally true in setting your own, you know, realistic goals and how you get someplace. If you can get there, you're like, oh, I did it. Now I can go to the next one too. So it's perfect. I'm going to have to incorporate that. Maybe I'll write a blog post about it.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate your time today. And if people want to get in touch with you, where should they go?
Well, the best portal to start at is Lida360.com, and that's LIDA360.com. From there, you can get to my blog, and I blog every couple weeks about topics on personal branding. I'm also on basically every social networking site you can imagine. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. I've got 20 videos on YouTube.
Awesome.
And for the veterans out there, YouTube, I have a 52-minute video that I produced for veterans in transition. It's completely free, tons of information, and any veteran out there who's looking for that guidance can simply watch that video, and there's a lot of tips on there.
Cool.
Lida360 is the best place to start.
And that video is on your YouTube channel?
Yes.
Okay, very cool. Yeah.
So I have a lot of videos on YouTube. That one is the big one, and a lot of news hits and things like that.
Cool, cool. Well, for those folks who are listening and watching, his website is below. And if this is the first time watching one of the Personal Brand Mechanics interviews, and if you're on YouTube, you just look to the right over there. You'll see the other YouTube, the videos that I've recorded here. And so, Lida, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate you sharing these wonderful tips with us today. And let's stay connected, and I wish you the best of luck. Do you have a new book you're working on?
I do. That's a little secret. I'm starting this summer. My next book is going to be the personal branding journey for veterans.
Awesome.
So I'm connecting with a lot of fantastic veterans out there through my own work, and through their help, we're going to get this book out there. So
very cool. We look forward to seeing that, and I'm sure it'll be a very useful resource. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your summer as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.